Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Oh, so cool to see people pop in. We are very excited about this event. I know we're starting just a minute or two early, so take your time to get settled in, and we will get started here with the good stuff very soon. Love seeing some names here I recognize. Nice to see you all. My name is Kara. I'm head of marketing at Hustle Fund, and I am joined today by Robin Zander of Zander Media. We are going to be covering the topic of storytelling, and we are taking a very tactical approach to this event. So using storytelling to help you close more deals, whether that's get in front of more investors, acquire more customers, or attract A-player employees. Storytelling, if done well, do all of those things and more. Before we dive into the meat of it, we're so excited to have this community here with us today. Why don't you go ahead and open up the chat and tell us where you are dialing in from? And also, if you are building something, what are you building? Being at a startup, whether you are a founder or employee, can be quite lonely, and hopefully you can use this community to connect with each other and support one another. So please let us know where in the world you are and what you are working on. I know we have a global audience at Hustle Fund, and so we often get people from all over the world, although this is certainly a nice time for people based in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, so before we bring Robin in, I want to talk a little bit about why storytelling is so powerful. I'm somebody who has produced hundreds of events. I have written hundreds of articles. That is a crazy sentence to say, but is true. And what I over and over again is that narrative-driven content is so powerful, and it is what people gravitate towards the most. Whether you are talking about something tactical or something inspiring or something promotional, using stories to wrap up your message is a great way to connect with people. So I'm really excited about this event. Robin is going to be joining us soon. Robin is the founder of Zander Media, and he is a master storyteller, you guys. We're going to learn so much from him. He's going to give us a much more deep version of his background here in a moment, but I just want to brag on him for a second because Robin is pretty incredible. He has a very varied background. He's done a number of different things. I had a chance to meet Robin a few years ago when I hired him to capture footage of an event I was producing. But I learned very quickly Robin is not just a videographer. He is, oh my gosh, someone's from Petaluma, you guys. I'm in Petaluma too. That's really exciting. Okay. Robin is not just a videographer, and I learned that very quickly. He has a knack for drawing people's stories out of them, and not just people, but companies, brands, startups, VCs. In fact, Hustle Fund is a VC, and we ended up hiring Robin to help us tell our story just ahead of a fundraise. So we're well versed in his talents and how we can utilize his gift of storytelling to enhance our business. All that to say, if you're looking to get more investors, more customers, more employees, and you believe in power of storytelling like I do, you're going to get a lot out of this next hour. As a side note, Hustle Fund is hosting an in-person event for startups and their teams later next month in Northern California. Robin is going to be leading a session there in person around branding and storytelling. It's going to be amazing. Hope you can join us. All right. I think you've probably heard me talk enough, and we have, I think, hit quorum here in terms of our attendees. So I'm going to hand it over to Robin. And actually one quick announcement before I do. This is very much designed to be an interactive experience. So while you attendees cannot access your microphones or cameras, we would love to hear from you. Whatever questions you have, we want to get to them. So you should see at the bottom or on the side of your screen a little Q&A box. Please, at any moment, tap on that Q&A and throw your questions in. We will try to get to as many of them as we possibly can. You're welcome to use the chat as well, and we'll try to monitor both. Okay, enough of me. Robin, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kara, and thank you, everybody. 60 folks here right now. Really delighted to be here with you all today. I'm not just a little bit sunburned, I'm also blushing for Kara, your warm remarks and your praise. I often introduce myself as a professional dilettante. I've held at last count more than 30 different jobs over the last 37 years. But as Kara says, something that I have done consistently throughout, and more recently in the last 5 or 6 years made a career of, is helping people to tell their stories. And as a multiple time founder, both of venture-backed and not venture-backed companies, I've found that story as a mechanism to gain more customers, attract really great employees, raise money from funders, from VCs, et cetera, whatever it is that you're trying to do for your business, it gets more effective when you tell stories. So I'll share some of the tactics that I'm going to cover today. We've got about 40 minutes that we're going to spend covering these 3 different tactics, each with a little bit of Q&A at the end of each section. And then the last 20 minutes or so, maybe 15 minutes, we'll try and end a few minutes early and be respectful of all of your time. We'll open it up for even more broad Q&A. But the 3 different tactics that I am going to be talking about today, and that Kara and I will host a little bit of Q&A on, are how to refine your story, how to build emotional connection, and how to communicate what's in it for your clients. And so what I'm going to ask to start is, since our time is limited with just this 40 minutes on those 3 topics, drop in the chat, if you would, which of those, and I'll repeat them again in a minute, is most exciting to you. If we could only focus on one today or really double down on one, which is the one that actually strikes a chord for you? So how to refine your story, how to build emotional connection, or communicating what's in it for your clients. And Kara and I will just take maybe 60 seconds to look at some of your responses there. I see Kim, emotional connection. Chuck, nice to see you, Chuck. How to build emotional connection. Stacy, refining. Sam, how to communicate what's in it for your clients. Keep them coming, folks. How to build emotional connection. Great. Super useful. All right. Well, while you keep doing that, I'm going to speak very briefly to what essentially is a story. And there's lots and lots of different tactics. If you're interested, I can give you a million books and YouTubers and content galore on what is story and how to tell story. But the simplest possible version is a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there's some sort of peak experience. There's some sort of challenge that the protagonist needs to go through, and then they come out the other side with a resolution. So at its core, any story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, a conflict, and a resolution. And so as you're thinking about storytelling, I don't ever think about storytelling in the broad strokes, right? Storytelling is a tool. Like, is it a tool for entertainment, right? I want to watch something, and whether that's a movie or a TV show that has a compelling story, or in our case, closing deals, making sales, right? Most of what I have succeeded in business from doing is by selling people things, right? That is at the core of commerce, at the core of business. And so when we are telling stories, right, what is it that you're trying to do? A little bit of background about me. I've built in the last 7 years, I guess it's been now, 3 successful businesses, Zander Media being the current. I also run a conference about the future of work called Responsive Conference, all about building more resilient and responsive organizations. And then previous to those, I started a restaurant in San Francisco in 2016, which I sold on Craigslist 2.5 years later. So that's a whole story in itself that we'll get into a little bit. But having talked a little bit about what stories are, and right, that stories have a purpose. They have a guiding light that we are trying to execute something, whether that's to get people to laugh or to get people to buy what we're having to sell, or to persuade a friend, right? You're trying to decide to go to Indian food and not Thai food for dinner, and you can use story to persuade, to reach towards the outcome that you want. How to refine your story. What I want you to do to start, and if you all would please do this in the chat, we'll be watching, is we'll spend about 60 seconds and write out in 1 to 2 sentences how your best customer would describe you or your business. So spend 60 seconds, type it out. How would your best customer describe you or your business? And please do drop those into the chat. We'd love to see those, and we'll come back to those after I talk a little bit about refining your story. I'm seeing peace of mind, a partner, magical. Rather than just one word, there we go. Now I'm seeing a little bit more. This is great. Thank you, everybody. Trusted advisor, trusted partner in their journey towards a more balanced life. This is great. Cool. Well, while those are coming in, a couple of years ago, Zander Media worked with a company called Kinkor Consulting, which is a recruiting company that embeds recruiters into fast growth startups. And through our work with Kinkor Consulting, we helped transform them into a very sleek and very modern organization. To show what I mean, I'm going to share with you a snapshot from the Wayback Machine of their website before we started working together. Find share here. Their website was a little bit outdated. Their tagline, I think it was in jest, but it's still pretty bad, is because divine intervention is not an option. And when I land on this website, or when I landed on this website, I had absolutely no idea what they did. Probably worst of all, even though they had a good reputation in their market, their phone number is listed on the website, and their call us for a free consultation resulted in a dead number. So we clearly had a fair bit of work to do. As I say, they embed recruiters into fast-growing startups, and they didn't have their message clear. They did not know how to describe the value that they contributed. And so what we did, and what anybody can do, is conducted interviews with about 20 different people in their ecosystem. And what we heard again and again were some common terms. We heard talent partner, and we heard that they're different. And so we strung those together and then went back and iterated on it. And we came up with the new tagline, Kinkor Consulting, a different kind of talent partner. And so the tactics that we use at Zander Media are actually tactics that anybody can use to refine your story. You have to gather data, summarize that data, and then iterate on it. We gathered, in this case, data through interviews. We synthesized that information by reading the transcripts and taking notes. And then we brought those notes back to the Kinkor leadership team and iterated together until we landed on something that really resonated with who they are, what they did, and how they were communicated about in the market. And it was only after that that we created a video that really captures the spirit of both what it means to be a fast-growing startup and what Kinkor Consulting can do to support companies like that. So I will play that video just so you can see we went from, again, that image in the Wayback Machine all the way forward into this just about a 1-minute video. Share screen, make sure to do so with sound and optimize for video. And there we go.
When you start out, there's no way of knowing where building your business will take you. You start scrappy, just you, maybe a co-founder, and you've hired a few friends. Now you're in a cramped office, working to capacity, but your idea is taking off. You're growing fast. You've exhausted your network and your teams. You're just plain exhausted. You need help. But no one likes expensive placement fees. How about a dedicated recruiter to make those first critical hires? You found product market fit. Growth is accelerating. You don't even recognize all the faces at your startup anymore. Systems to onboard new employees, software. Who has any time for that? As your company matures, you need a recruiting playbook that can scale. At Kinkor Consulting, we do all this and more, all with no placement fees, no retainer, and no minimum engagement. Start with expert embedded consultants to make those first critical hires. Lay the strategic foundation for your growth, then hire, train, and hand off to your team. Kinkor Consulting, we are a different kind of talent partner.
So all the way from an outdated website to a lot of language actually from that video is verbatim things that we heard their clients say, and then we strung it together. Seeing a couple of people still joining, so delighted to see everybody here. one other tactic that I hadn't planned on sharing, but watching that video again, I want to drop in as an idea for you when you're iterating on your story. Something that I will often challenge myself or my team or your clients to practice is, can you describe what you're trying to do in one sentence, one paragraph, and one page, right? Because that script for that video, which I specifically wrote, came from all of this data that we had accumulated through interviews. And anybody can find that organizing idea. And if you can articulate it in 3 different lengths, in 3 different kind of, again, a 1 or 2 sentences like we've asked you to do, which we'll iterate on in a minute, then a paragraph, then a page, you've got as much content as you need to be able to describe yourself, your company, your story as effectively as possible. Again, the tactics that I said, right, are gather data, which we did in the form of interviews, summarize that data, right, and synthesize it, kind of process it. I find it helps to read transcripts of interviews, take notes of those, and then see if you can write it out. Can you write it out? Challenge yourself. 1 sentence, 1 paragraph, 1 page, and then continue iterating on it until you get to something that really lands and really sticks. And only then, in this case with Kinkor, did we start creating content. So,
Robin, I want to jump in here and ask a couple of questions that some audience might have, and certainly I'm curious about. So one thing is, I imagine many of the folks here that are in attendance have already started working on their companies, and so they have some version of their story already. What are some signs that they should look for, qualitative or quantitative, that their story is not resonating?
It's a great question. I like, maybe on a quarterly basis, asking some of my customers, some of my clients, what is it that Zander Media does? What is it that Zander Media stands for? Right? You, Kara, going to people that you work with, whether that's vendors or founders that you're supporting, or just the network that is Hustle Fund, LPs, and saying, hey, what does Hustle Fund stand for? And if they can't articulate that very quickly to you, especially the folks who are closest to your organization. Another one that's I just find it real sweet is partners of employees at the company. What is it that you think Hustle Fund does, right? So people who are a little bit removed, but hear about your work in your company all day, every day. Every quarter, right? Companies' narratives shift subtly all the time. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that there needs to, and I don't think there should be, a brand overhaul on a quarterly basis, and far from, but brand and story is a constant process of iteration, just like we all are personally. We're constantly changing ourselves, changing things about ourselves, our diets, our habits. Organizations are changing too, and it's important that the stories we tell about our organizations keep up with those changes.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I thought you were going to tell me, like, what's the bounce rate on your website, or what's your conversion rate, which all are important things and metrics worth looking at. But I very much prefer your answer, because that feels like something we could actually do right now, today. Like, I want to do that as soon as I get off this call, actually.
And no amount is too small, right? You have a call, you have 4 calls today. At the end of each call, say, hey, thanks so much. We've talked about what we scheduled the time to talk about. Can I ask you one quick question? In 1 sentence, how would you describe Hustle Fund to me, right? In 1 sentence, how would you describe my company X to me? And just take notes, right? Note how people say that. All of a sudden, you've got 10 answers at the end of the week. And that's going to be more and interesting, useful information than if you sent a Survey Monkey every quarter to gather like formal data gathering process.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Just like build it as you go. What other questions? Because you were scheduling, when you worked with Kinkor, for example, you were scheduling calls with their customers, it sounds like, users, clients. What other questions were you asking those people to get to the heart of what you were looking to understand about the company?
How would you describe Kinkor? Or how would you describe company X? Maybe it's an awkward time to use that, but I'll continue with it regardless of Twitter. How would you describe this company? Who is this company for? Who is this company not for? What do you think they do particularly well? What do you think they do particularly not well? What do you think is commonly misunderstood about this organization? And I'm always going into these conversations, setting the table very thoughtfully and saying, hey, look, I'm here to gather information to help this company. You are a part of this conversation because you care about these conversations too. And so this is in confidence. I'm recording it just so I have transcripts, but nothing you say here is going to get back to, the founder of the company. Nothing here is going to hurt people's feelings. Like, please give as candid feedback as possible, because that will help us build this company that you care about even better. And so setting the stage, setting the context so that people feel safe to share what they really think.
Yeah, critical. It's hard to give feedback directly to someone's face, right? And in this case, directly to the company or the people who are building the company and pouring their blood, sweat, and tears into it. You don't want to make them feel like they're not doing a good job. But at the end of the day, businesses want to do well. And in order to do that, they have to improve, right? So I love that. I think that's really important to create a safe space. Okay, I have one more totally different question, and then happy to move on to the next section. Also, for everyone listening in, you have questions on refining your story, please feel free to drop it in the chat or the Q&A. Although I have more than enough questions for all of us forever. So I'm gonna put you on the spot here just a little bit, but here's the thing. Quick context is that I often hear pitches from startup companies that are a little bit complicated. Like the tech is really complicated, or more often, the company has a suite of products. And in fact, I've worked with advertisers, let's say, who have such a huge suite of products, I'm not actually sure what they do. I don't know how to describe their company. So how do you approach like the problem of refining the story of a company that's complicated? And an example that comes to mind for me is a massive organization, Microsoft. Now, Microsoft is obviously doing well. They probably don't need a rebrand, but they have a gazillion products and it can serve a variety of different customers. So how would you approach a brand therapy session or sort of refining the story of a company like that? Or if you have a different example you want to use, I'm open to that as well.
No, it's great. And we're going into the story of my former restaurant, Robin's Cafe, where I did have multiple people that I was seeking to serve. So we'll start with Microsoft and then we'll carry it straight into Robin's Cafe. Somebody who's using Microsoft Word is very different than somebody who's using Microsoft Excel. And so if I'm marketing for Word, that's a different use case than if I'm marketing for Excel, not to mention, Teams and Yammer and all of the different permutation, right? The AI components, like all of the different permutations that make up a giant behemoth company. But at the end of the day, we're talking to a specific human, right? A buyer is not a faceless person. A buyer is, right, you, Kara, right? I'm like, hey, I want to go see the new Barbie movie. Would you come with me? Right, here are the reasons why I think we should do that. Like, I am trying to persuade you. And it's really easy when we are selling our businesses to people or to other businesses to think there's not actually a human on the other end of the equation, but there is always a human on the other end of the equation. And the more targeted and the more specific the story that we can tell to that person, the more likely we're going to be effective. I think actually when we're just trying to tell a very, very broad story, generic, it becomes very vanilla, it becomes very bland and actually reaches nobody. And so the key to good storytelling is to tell it to the person that you're trying to reach, or, right, in some cases, the avatar of the person that you're trying to reach. But when I'm creating content or when I'm writing a new tagline for a company, I have a very specific person in mind. Usually it is a current or an ideal customer of that company who I am communicating to and who I'm writing for.
Amazing. I'm really excited to hear specifically how you accomplished that with Robin's Cafe, which I think we're going to get into.
Yep.
Next.
Right now. Yeah.
So great. I'm going to shut up again.
Oh, yeah. I saw a lot of interest from folks on how to build emotional connection. So we'll double down on this one in particular. As we said at the top, in 2016, I started a restaurant. I had previously worked in restaurants only so much as I had bussed tables in high school. I started the restaurant on 3 weeks' notice, and I sold it 3 years later on Craigslist. So again, there's a much bigger story there. But if you're ever in the Mission District in San Francisco, it's still around today, though I'm no longer affiliated. It's called Robin's Cafe. It's at 17th and Shotwell, and you should stop by. If you know the Mission District in San Francisco, you probably know ODC. They're a 50-year-old nonprofit arts and dance organization that has had a presence in that neighborhood for more than 30 years. And when I started my restaurant, I had lived in that neighborhood for 10 years, and I had been a dancer in their school for several years as well. Because I had lived in the neighborhood, I knew that that neighborhood was going through a period of transition and was on the rise. At the time, Valencia was kind of like the hot spot, and we were on the wrong side of the tracks from Valencia towards Potrero Hill. But it was a neighborhood that was just about to come up and just about to change in new and unexpected ways. Through a random series of circumstances, I was presented with kind of an unlooked for opportunity to buy some cafe assets. So an espresso machine, tables and chairs, an ice machine, and start my own restaurant. And the thing I needed to do was raise $50,000 to make that happen. I hadn't harbored a lifelong dream of opening up a restaurant or a coffee shop, but I did know that this neighborhood was on the rise and that this little corner that was dark at the time could become something to really serve an incredible neighborhood and a really incredible community. And given that it's still around today and doing well as far as I know, I think speaks to both the thing that I started, but also really what the neighborhood became. I'm going to talk specifically about raising the funds necessary to start the restaurant, because I think a lot of people here are raising funds, have raised funds, or looking to raise funds for their startup. And I think the key here is that I knew what the neighborhood was becoming. And I had a vision for who it could serve, who this restaurant could serve in a lot of different ways. And I'll give a couple of examples. My dear friend, Todd, and his partner, his wife, had a lifelong dream of opening up a coffee shop, as many people do. And when I reached out to them to say, hey, I'm raising $50,000 in as little as, a couple $1,000 increments as personal loans, right? So not as venture investment, but in personal loans, in return for investing in me and taking a chance on me to start this restaurant, you have the opportunity to learn alongside me so that someday when you start your own cafe and it's a retirement project, you have seen it before and you have a sense of going through it. Don't mind the children running around in the background here on my side. I also raised funds, and this is an example of ask from everybody possible, from an ex-girlfriend at the time, who was an employee at Accenture. And given her world of Accenture, she was really interested in the spreadsheets and the logistics of running an SMB, a small business. She wanted to know like the facts and figures and the state taxes and what are your margin cost averages and all of these pieces. And so, yes, she was investing in me, but for her, I showed the opportunity of like, hey, here you get to be on the inside and look on the inside of the spreadsheets that actually results in the running of a company. And then I also was very fortunate that my landlord owned this incredibly beautiful building, right? It was an arts organization and we had an art gallery as a part of the restaurant. And so my mother is a professional artist. And so when I approached her ecosystem and her friends and said, hey, there's an opportunity for me to own a restaurant that literally has an art gallery that I would control the art on the walls and you could have showings. Would you be interested in investing a couple $1,000s, right? Like I'm not asking for large amounts of money from individuals in return for being able to show some of your art on our walls for periods when we have gallery showings. And then I walked these people through the halls of ODC and I walked them through the counter, like behind the counter of the cafe. I walked them down my street and I showed them my vision for what this could become. It could become an art gallery and an active restaurant. It could become a meeting space for the startups on the street, for the dance students who took class at ODC, for this mix of communities. I had a clear vision, and that's my first tactic for you when you're thinking about building emotional connection with people that you're trying to sell to. You have to know the thing that you are inviting them to see. You have to see it clearly in your own mind. Having an emotion yourself, right? So for me, that was excitement, that was enthusiasm, hope, awe for what this neighborhood was becoming. And you have to show them and not just tell them, right? So literally in my case, because it was a brick and mortar, being able to walk them through it. But if it's a technology startup, walking your potential customer or potential funder through, even if it's a series of slides, right? But ideally it's actually through the technology product itself, showing them the experience or the hope for what the experience could be and getting them excited. And then finally, back to where we started, tailoring the story to the person that you're talking to. Who are you talking to, and how is your story going to change accordingly? So to foster emotional connection, have a clear vision, share your emotions with your potential customer, show them and not just tell them, and then tailor the story to the person in question. I will go into Q&A, but I'd like to spend just a couple of minutes, maybe not a couple of minutes, 60 seconds, getting just a little bit more specific. So we had you earlier write out a one sentence about your organization, about your company. I'd like to spend another 60 seconds, pick one person. Maybe it's somebody you've already pitched to. So it's a VC that you've been in front of, or a client maybe who said no. And given your company, what emotions do you want that person to feel? What is the emotional experience that when you are pitching them, you would like for them to experience? So take about a minute and write down in a couple of sentences the emotion that you want your customer, your VC, your prospective sales target to feel. So I see Hasib say trust, and I'd encourage you to get even more specific. What is trust? When somebody feels trust, what is it that they feel towards you?
And Robin, while we wait for people, Sid has asked if you could please articulate those 4 steps again.
I can do that, absolutely. And I will also drop them in as copy for you, Sid. But the 4 steps are: have a clear vision. So know the specifics of the vision you are communicating to your audience. Share your emotions with your customer. What are you excited about or hopeful for? What is it that you are feeling yourself, right? For me, again, you heard it. It's awe for the rise of what that neighborhood and the mission was becoming. Show your customer, not just tell them, right? So in whatever your version of the experience is, walk them through the halls of the thing that you are building and tailor your story to the person in question. Ooh, I see a really fun one here. Relief, sense of excitement and relief for a solution to a big problem. I really like relief a lot. Hope is another really one, is a really compelling one. Thank you, Monique. Excitement, yeah. Security, accomplishment. And I hear accomplishment, I actually hear satisfaction. I hear kind of that, like that warm glow at the end of the day. Hope is a really interesting one. I like that a lot, JR. This is great, everybody.
You know, one thing I want to just chime in with here, and I love these, but coming from a VC perspective, I also want to say that you're pitching to a VC and you have a vision for your business, what you want your customer to feel. That's really kind of in line with the problem slide, right, of your deck. So what is the problem you're helping them solve for, and how does your solution make their lives better? So if I could get tactical, and we're going to go off topic just for a quick second here, this is something I'm very passionate about, which is that when you are talking to a VC about what it is you're building, I see a lot of startups talk about, you know, this is an AI powered platform that's available on the cloud, making all sorts of fun features and buzzwords there. And the most powerful cold emails are able to very succinctly tell us what is this feeling actually that your customer gets. So as opposed to what are the features that come when somebody signs up and logs in, VCs really want to know about how are you delivering so much value that it almost doesn't matter what your actual product is. And everything that you're saying here is great. Somebody had one about security, that people are able to sleep better at night, Hasib, which is such a powerful phrase. I think many investors would see the value of what you're building, because that's something that is priceless for your customers. And when something's priceless for your customers, they're willing to pay for it, right?
Yeah, feelings, not features. Really nice, Sid. Well, let's open it up for questions. I'm more than halfway through our time together today. Kara, do you want to kick off with a couple of questions, and then we'll go into how to communicate what's in it for your customer as the last third of today's session?
Yes. So one thing I want to talk about, when you opened up Robin's Cafe, or were in the process of doing so, you were very lucky in that you approached people who you had a personal relationship with. You knew what drove them, why it would benefit them personally to invest in the business. Many of our listeners today are talking to VCs who they've never met before, or they're trying to get in front of customers they've never interacted with. How do you tailor a story to somebody that you're talking to if you don't know them personally beyond just looking at their LinkedIn?
Yep. If we go back actually to some of the people that I pitched for fundraising for the cafe, I didn't know them prior to the pitch. It just sounds like I did now because I pitched them and then went through the journey with them for a couple of years. There are so many people on the internet who share very readily their context, their cares, their children's faces, their business aspirations on the internet. So these days, I don't really go into a meeting without doing at least a little bit of exploration, and often several hours of deep dive into who this person is and what their aspirations are, and who they are when they're at home and at work before I'm sitting down for a sales call. Certainly LinkedIn, like that's just an easy one, but there are so many different places to glean information. How is their work bio written on their company's website, right? How do they describe themselves on Twitter? Do they have a personal website? Most VCs are active on now X or and similar platforms. I don't think I've seen any VCs, or very, very few, that don't have a website that kind of states their mission and purpose. If I was pitching Elizabeth at Hustle Fund, I would listen to every single episode of the pitch, which I have, to know who Elizabeth is and what kind of organizations she invests in, right? That will make you better at pitching, but that will also give you a sense of, oh, what are the kinds of organizations that Elizabeth and from their Hustle Fund is looking for, right? And Hustle Fund specifically puts out so much content. Consuming that content is going to make you better at pitching Hustle Fund specifically. Yes, there may be situations where you go in cold, but I think that 99% of the time, we don't have to pitch cold. We can be telling stories specific to the person. What kind of sports teams? How old are their kids? Where in the world are they? Are they proud of their academic affiliations, right? Any of these things. And you might not even use them, but it helps you have a sense when you go in of, oh, this is the person that I'm talking to. This is the person that I'm looking to sell, to raise money from, et cetera.
That's really helpful. So I'll just ask one more, because I have a whole other section to get to, and there are some questions in Q&A I want to get to, but it sounds like when you were pitching Robin's Cafe, because there were different aspects of the cafe that would appeal to different investors, it sounds like you tailored your pitch to that sort of focus. So for the artists, you focused on the art gallery. I think this was also a place that you wanted parents of kids in the dance program to be able to come and hang out. So you probably had a different pitch for that community. I guess my question is, do you recommend, if somebody knows the investor I'm pitching cares so much about climate change, and they want to back like the best climate change companies. And part of my organization, there's some element of climate change or climate change awareness. So would you recommend that we only focus at least our initial email on that one element, because we got to keep our cold emails really short and snappy? Or are we trying to paint a picture of everything and sort of see what fish we're catching and then hone in from there?
Yeah. First off, sending cold emails. If I was fundraising from VCs today specifically, I would not send cold emails. I think I would send 0 cold emails. I would find a way, and it requires a lot more work, but I would find a way to gain introductions and to get to know the VCs that I'm pitching well in advance, right? The best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago, but the next best time is now, right? Start forming the relationships that you might eventually use to raise money or to sell to long before you need them. So that's the first thing, just as an aside to what you said. If I had a venture-backed startup that had an element of climate change, but was mostly about, I don't know, AI, I probably wouldn't pitch to climate VCs. I don't think that spray and pray, that sending 100,000 cold emails and hoping that 100 of those people will get back to you and then you might get pitches with 10 of them is a very effective way to accomplish it. What I would probably do is reach out to the climate change VCs and say, hey, I appreciate that your time is really sensitive. I care enormously about the climate, and 5% of our company is related to climate, but that's probably not enough for you to invest in. Who do you think I should talk to, right? Are there other founders of yours that I might take a look at, or that I could get an introduction to? Are there other VCs in your network or other angels, right? Who else might I just ask some informational interviews and questions of? And I think that we as founders are often hesitant to ask for informational interviews because it kind of feels like it might spoil the opportunity later to fundraise or to sell. But if you're not clear exactly who you are selling to at what time, then spending more time doing research before you go into a pitch.
Love it.
And
That's
Robert,
not the answer I was expecting, but I like that. I like that so much. Go ahead.
Yeah. Robert says, ooh, and asking for help creates a personal connection as well with that VC. Yes, exactly. That's really well put, Robert.
I agree with that. And one small piece of advice is to ask for an introduction to just one person, because that's a much easier thing to do than when you ask an open-ended question like who are people that you recommend I talk to. I a lot of people on my team are very overwhelmed by that question, but when you say, do you know one person who might be a good fit, people are much more likely to respond. Just a hot tip.
Yep. Nice. Sid says, would you recommend sending a 30-second or a 1-minute Loom video to articulate your story? I would not. As much as I run a video company, if people don't expect a video or a Loom, it might appear like spam. And I think it's a really good challenge to yourself to be able to articulate it in writing in a sentence, or write a short, snappy email, write a 3-sentence email that can result in you getting on Zoom or a meeting with somebody for 15 minutes. And then one last question before we move on. Alan says, what's an informational interview? An informational interview is an interview where you are not trying to sell, you are just trying to glean information, right? So, hey, Kara, will you give me some feedback on my startup? I have just a couple of quick questions. Would you be willing to spend 10 minutes? I'd really, really value your specific opinion because you're such an incredible marketer and we are in that space. Would you be willing, right? And then I'm just asking for her feedback in that moment. All right. So we've covered a lot of information and tactics. We've talked about how to refine your story, how to build emotional connection, and now we're going to talk about how to communicate what's in it for your clients. One of our actually current clients is an accounting and finance firm called Ursa Consultants. And I don't know about you all, but as a founder myself, and over the last decade, I've often struggled to get a great accountant or CPA who can help me understand and make sense of the numbers, right? Because I don't just want a financial report. I want to understand what the financial report has to say. When we started working with Ursa Consultants, their tagline was service, integrity, and commitment, which to me, and sorry, Jace, that's about as bland as bathwater. And so what was really interesting is that when I sat down with their founder, Jace, what I realized is what they really do is help founders recognize that narrative behind their numbers. to really get to the truth of their business, and that they do so by putting people first, by prioritizing people within their own agency, their own accounting firm, and prioritizing the connection between their accountants at Ursa and the founders and startup executives that they're serving. So they are very much a people first company. And that was the thing that we uncovered. Very similar to the process that I described earlier on through interviews, et cetera, we came to this people first accounting and finance, which is their tagline today. And the first step was to uncover that truth. That was what they were already doing. But then we actually also had to communicate that. And so the tactics in this section are pretty straightforward. It's thoroughly understanding the issue, which for me as a founder was really easy because I had had that as a pain point myself for a decade. And then communicating how your company solves that problem, right? And this is actually the first time in today's hour that we've talked at all about marketing. Or messaging or brand or communications, right? Communicating how your company solves that problem. And to do effective storytelling or to effectively sell or fundraise, we have to do both of these. We have to understand the core message, and then we have to communicate that message. We have to communicate what the benefit is that your customer receives. With Ursa, we made a commercial, but the thing that I will share right now is just a hilarious smattering of photos. We created a character whose name is Roy, R-O-I, the bear, and we staged a series of photo shoots. And now anytime Ursa is sponsoring a conference, Roy the bear makes a guest appearance in the bear costume. So here are some photos of Jace on the right and Roy the bear on the left. And we humanized very playfully what could be a very stodgy, it's just another accounting firm. I get pitched them all the time on LinkedIn. But here we have an organization with a full character who brings out the play in their otherwise serious CEO that is very recognizable, right? You walk around a conference and you see literally somebody in a bear costume, and it really, it's like, okay, wait, what's going on here, right? The humor to it, the playfulness to it. So thoroughly understanding the issue, which we've talked about in all three cases, and then communicating how your company solves that problem, right? And simply by changing the tagline from service, integrity, and commitment to people first accounting and finance, all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, you put people first, huh? Like what does that mean, right? There's a question there, and all of a sudden I'm at least more interested in learning more. From there, of course, we did the photo shoot. Roy the bear makes appearances at conferences. We launched a podcast. We created a commercial, and on and on and on. But the content starts after that organizing idea is really clearly established. So I want to take one more minute and have you revise your sentence from the very beginning. So go back to the sentence that you wrote and rewrite it with what is the benefit to your customer? How is the benefit that you are trying to communicate going to reach your customer? We'll take just 1 minute, revisit those 1 to 2 sentences and look at them very critically and see if you can make any changes to them with the lens of how is what you are communicating, how is the story of your startup benefiting your customer? And do drop those into the chat. Nice, Chuck. You'll never face your challenges alone with Chuck at your side. I like the alliteration between challenges and Chuck as well, just a note. Another 30 seconds. Please do drop your 1 to 2 sentences into the chat. More time with your patients, less time reporting. Nice, Ken. Alan says, give users a new experience reading comic books by adding animation and interactivity. I would challenge you, Alan, to define new experience with some sort of emotion, right? An awesome experience, a delightful experience, right? What is the sensation that you want them to have? Instant peace of mind for your loved ones back home. Nice, Kara. We'll help you become the startup that goes all the way. Leave the technology to us. This is great, everybody. All right, we are 10 minutes from the end of today's session. So I'll just do a brief review, and Kara's smiling at me because I'm keeping us on track. So tactics that we've talked about today, and then a couple of bullet points for each. How to refine your story, right? I talked or consulting, and the tactics of gathering data. My preference is through interviews. Summarizing that data, I like to do that by reading transcripts and taking copious notes, and then iterating on that until you can reach a new organizing principle or tagline slogan for the company. We've talked about everybody's and many people's most exciting one, which is building emotional connection. Sounds like maybe there's a future webinar just on how to build emotional connection with your customers. Really accessing the very specific person or ideal customer profile that you are selling to, and building emotional connection by having a clear vision, sharing that emotion with your customers, showing them, not just telling them, and then tailoring your story to that very specific person. And then how to communicate what's in it for your customer, right? You have to have a thorough understanding of the issue, and then you have to communicate how your company solves that problem. One last note and reminder, when I think about, is this effective, right? Am I effectively telling a story that has a beginning, a middle, and end, an arc, and a conclusion? It's a practice, just like, right, tacking a little bit of interview questions on the tail end of 15-minute, 30-minute meeting that's already happening. Build the habit of telling people stories, right? Build the habit of recognizing when you're doing so, because we're all social animals. We live and die by the stories we tell each other. That is what persuasion is. That is what sales is. That is what we do when we're going on a date or talking to a family member or trying to decide where to eat dinner, not just when we're pitching our company to prospective clients and VCs. And so this is actually great news because you can practice at any time. I notice all the time when I specifically tell people that I sold my last business on Craigslist, I always get a chuckle. And so I've iterated on that. And I saw the chuckle the first time, and then I was like, oh, that's the piece that lands. How do I come back to that? Cool, is there a story to tell there, right? But that's an iteration over the course of hundreds of times of telling that story. So every time you talk to a friend, spend, just a minute and say, how can I improve the story here, right? Every time you talk to a customer, maybe make a recording, listen to the transcript, or read the transcript, but notice, what can I do to improve my story in this context, and generate this library of examples of stories that you tell regularly already, and then just continue to refine them, right? Storytelling and sales take practice. And so just practice those little steps along the way. If you want more also along this line, I talk about habits weekly via a newsletter, a free personal newsletter. So I'll drop the link in there, and then let's go into some more questions.
And I have to say, I Robin's newsletter, and I love it. Something in there always speaks to me. It always feels like there's something in your newsletter where I'm like, oh, I needed to hear that this week. So I don't know how you do that. It's magical. Okay, Robin, this has been amazing. There's two questions in particular from the audience I really want to address today. One is around companies that are so early, they maybe haven't achieved product market fit yet, or they're on their way to getting there. Companies that don't have 20 customers that they can talk to, or certainly not, if they do, maybe not all of them will agree to an interview. How do you recommend that those founders or operators go about getting enough input to refine their story?
Talk to people and ask them questions. right? I'll share a sort of out of left field example. I drove for Lyft in the earliest days of Lyft, right? Back when we had pink mustaches on the fronts of our cars in San Francisco. And at the time I was considering getting an MBA. I ended up not getting an MBA because that's what the Robbins Cafe was for me, was my personal MBA. But as a result of driving for Lyft, I happened to come into contact with some MBA folks, both in school and previously graduated, and I interviewed them. I was just like, hey, while we're driving, do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions? Was the MBA worth it? What did you think? Where did you go to school? And just having a list of those 15 questions. And I ended up ultimately deciding that while an MBA is useful for building network, right, the brand affiliation associated with this school, right, and very specific jobs that require an MBA or benefit, it wasn't ultimately something that I needed as a learned expertise that I couldn't get in the real world. That was my decision. But I couldn't have reached that decision except by interviewing. I think I probably interviewed 25 like students and post MBA graduates in the course of 3 months, right? People are available to ask questions of. You have to be clear as to like, cool, I want to interview executives at mid-sized companies in San Francisco, right? Whatever it is. But start talking to people and start asking them, hey, do you have somebody else that I could talk to as well? And just start having those conversations.
I love that. I agree. There are people out there, the people you want to eventually sell your to. And I will add one thing. This is Gabriel's question, is a really good one, which is that if you are going to go out and have interviews with people who you would like to sell to eventually, it could be that the people actually buying the product, maybe it's a CMO, somebody who might be harder to get on their calendar to do an informational interview with and get this information from. And I would really encourage you to go a few steps lower to somebody who is in the weeds all the time of marketing, if your product's in marketing, and ask them, because they're dealing with these pain points. And if you present your request as a way of like, you are clearly like somebody who is well versed in this field, and I would love to pick your brain if you seem to be an expert in this, it's a great way to a little bit of an ego play is never bad, and certainly might help you get an in, especially if you do it in a genuine way. Okay, Robin, I want to ask one more question from Lucius, which is, so it sounds like Lucius is building a company in a highly competitive market, a challenger product, an organization that's already a behemoth. What are some effective ways to improve the storytelling for a company like this?
So I highly recommend reading the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. Was written, I think, in the 80s, but it's still really relevant today. And I actually prefer the old version to the new and updated version. Mason says, great book. But one of the laws is about building a challenger brand, right? So if I were building a brand against Salesforce, right, as a CRM, I would specifically say, right, like, we're the underdogs. I think it was Budget that came along and said, we came second, so we try harder. Great. Thank you so much, Kara. The idea of a challenger brand is actually really fun to me, right? Being the underdog. It's the reason that Lyft did so well, is that they were the anti-Uber in the early days. And so look for the weaknesses of the market and of the behemoths in the market, right? There's always room for one more. And then the goal over time is to steal market share. But in the earliest stages of that, you position yourself in direct opposition to the thing about the behemoth that most people don't like.
That is so brilliant. And I can think of an example actually as well. So I'm a big fan of Salesforce. I think the organization is fabulous and the values in which they operate by are wonderful. To be really good at Salesforce, you have to get Salesforce certified. And I saw an organization that built, and there's so many CRM tools out there, but I saw an organization recently that positioned themselves something along the lines of, you don't need certification to use our product, right, to its fullest potential. And to me, that was really attractive. Yeah, I don't have 5 months to get certified in a product. I need to use it today. So,
yep.
Robin, this has been outstanding. You are a wealth of knowledge, and we're so grateful to you for sharing your time and wisdom. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Such a pleasure, Kara. It's really always a joy when we get to spend time together, and everyone's had such great questions. This has been a total treat.
Amazing. If people have follow-up questions or want to get in touch with you, want to follow along, how can we reach you? How can we stay in touch?
Yep. follow along the weekly newsletter. And you are welcome to drop me a line. My email is now in the chat, robin@zandermedia.com.
Amazing. Oh, that's so generous of you. You guys, thank you so much for joining us. We know you have a lot of things you can do with your time. We hope you got much value out of this. We will share the recording out later if you want to revisit anything. And thank you for joining us and have a beautiful day.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kara.
My pleasure. Bye.